It is neck heavy. This shirt doesn't help, but it's neck heavy guitar. So we have bridge. Tons of reverb. Get rid of that. Then middle on its own. Neck on its own. Got quite high action going on here at the moment, which it's nowhere near as high as it came, but I've obviously just done a temporary tweak. So that's just on and off for each of the pickups. So the out of phase thing only works when you've got one or more pickups on, so put on the bridge and middle together. That's in phase, and if we flip one button up, out of phase. Doesn't matter which way round it is as long as one's opposite to the other. Neck and bridge. In phase, thinner. Out of phase. Anyway, that's just a quick listen to the tones on their own. Let's just put this on the deck for a minute so we can have a look at it. So it is the Burns Brian May Red Special. Yeah, Burns Red Special. Anyway, Brian's, by chance, it's Brian's guitar, and Brian has bought it second hand and sent it to me. If you think Brian's a code name, you might be right, so just leave it at that. Nothing's mysterious. Think wives, secrets. Anyway, so Brian's bought this second hand, and it's a Burns version, which is slightly different from the version that I had, which was the Brian May guitars version. The bridge is different, so this is a Burns of London Bridge, and the pivot point is under there, whereas on the one I had it was a Wilkinson with the thingies there. Anyway, so what we've got on this thing is we've got the absolute standard thing. The one I had, did it have a thing behind there? Oh, I can't remember. I think it had the plastic thing there. Kind of looks cool. The original Brian May. Did the original? Do you know what? Anyway, there's a sort of half moon thing behind there. Looks great, but this one doesn't have it. But it's in every which way very, very similar to the Brian May. Same kind of chunky neck. It's a set neck without the big bolt that Brian's has got in there, the original guitar. And we've got the simple controls, which simple but revolutionary in Brian's world. So you have on-off switches on the top here for the pickups, and then you have phase switching down there. And so if you put that one on, bridge pickup comes on, put that one on, bridge and middle, and as soon as you've got two on here, they're in phase with each other. Now they're out of phase, so that thins the sound out. Now they're in phase, now they're out of phase. So it doesn't matter which way up these phase switches are. If they're in the same place, they're in phase. So then you throw in the third one, and if the third one's out of phase with those two, as it is there, it'll thin out, scoop out the sound. Now we're all in phase. Now the middle one's out of phase. Now the bridge one's out of phase, and so on. Now the bridge is in phase with the neck, but out of phase with the middle. So you always get that sort of slightly scooped sound as a result of that little option. Tone there, volume there, which is, as you all know, Brian reaches for that all the time when he's playing this guitar. So I had one of these once, and it is beautiful. There's nothing. This is a unique shape of guitar. It's kind of, it has some nods to Gibsons. It has nods to some of the most beautiful guitars of the 60s, early 60s. But it's unique, and as you know, designed by Brian and his dad over a period of a couple of years, and they really went to town. Not just because they thought they could do better, but because Brian couldn't afford a top-notch guitar, so they used what they had, which was their engineering skill and their kind of initiative and hard work, and they built this thing. And it's incredible in that the original Red Special is the only guitar Brian's ever really played all the way through the years, and it's unique in its function. It's chambered, so it feeds back. I just had this feeding back over there when I was playing it, whether it's on video or not. Anyway, it's a resonant guitar. It's alive. It feeds back. This is very, very similar, and I've seen Brian May playing various ones of these. And in fact, he has a couple he has on stage as backups and pre-tuned for different things, I think. But he's got a rack that include some top quality versions of this. So everything lives under here. So when you come to change or fix the electrics, you have to take this whole plate off. There's no accessing from the back. Sorry, this one is, but in Brian's the one there isn't. Look at me. And Brian's one, the tremolo function, the spring lives below here and is tuned, tightened and slacked off from the end here. So on his guitar there is no access through a back, but this, because it's a familiar sprung tremolo, it has more familiar Strat style access, but the electrics are all accessed underneath this pick guard. So this is Brian, inverted commas, guitar, and it came in. First of all, he wanted me to check it over to see what I thought of it, and my initial response to it is it's all intact. It was horribly set up when it came in, and if the previous owner had been playing it like this, then I feel very, very sorry for them, because they would have. It was a mile high, high down here, and the tremolo was all over the place, and so it was just not going to play nicely at all, which is a shame, because they must have had a horrible experience of it. And if you can't if you can't either get one of these set up nicely, or it isn't set up, or you can't do it yourself, then you are condemned, I have to say, to a miserable experience, because with the action wrong, with the tremolo wrong, and also with the strings unstretched and going out of tune all the time, the net result is actually lousy, and you'd be forgiven for thinking this was a terrible guitar. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if it had something to do with it being sold for second hand. So I had one years ago after doing some work in corporate land, and Claire said to me, treat yourself to a brand guitar. And I'm not really a branded guitar type of person, and I was sort of thinking of a Gibson, and I thought, well, actually I'm not really that bothered with Gibsons, but I had always loved the Red Special, so I treated myself to a new Brian May red. I think it was more of an antique wood colour, but that was my treat. And I had it for a couple of months, and I have to say I played it a little bit and then I sold it. And the question, when people have asked me in the past, why did you sell it? And I have to say, this guitar, and I know that Brian isn't going to like me saying this, because Brian, I think, values my take on these things, and I don't want to start him off feeling in any way bad about this guitar, because it's actually a beautiful playing guitar. The reason I got rid of it is because, why did I get rid of it? I got rid of it because it's for me it's too specific. Okay, and meaning that not only is it completely unique to Brian May, not only is it a guitar that he has played all his career, which is not a bad thing. You could say, well, Gary Moore played a Les Paul throughout his career, and so on and so on. That's fine, but nobody else. This is so specific that nobody else will you see in any modern band turning up with one of these on stage as their guitar. So this guitar doesn't get treated like any other guitar in the world. So switch on the TV, go and watch a whole set of bands. Not a single band will be playing with one of these. I mean, you might get a school band where the kid's got one for his, for a special guitar and whatever, Queen fan. And so realistically, but with a few tiny exceptions. The only place you're going to see this is on a Queen tribute, or a Queen, somebody brings it out for a Queen song on a covers band type of thing, which is kind of bizarre, really, when you think about it, because there is no, Gibson Les Paul doesn't get treated like that. You know, loads of great players have all used that instrument, and it's become, you know, the sort of staple of rock and roll. This is the staple of Queen, and it's so specific in that respect that if I walked out on stage with a Les Paul, just leave aside how crap a guitarist I am, if I walked out on stage with a Gibson Les Paul, nobody would really bat an eyelid and they'd expect me to play any kinds of music. If I walked out on stage with this, people would say, "Hey, tie your mother down, Bohemian Rhapsody, give me whatever, Hammer to Fall." And if I didn't have the treble, the range, was it thingy Ranger treble booster, and if I didn't have the AC30 amp tube circuit cranked up, whatever, you know, if I didn't make the Brian May sound, people would go, "Boo, you don't sound anything like Brian May." So even if you did take one of these out to play, I don't know, Smoke on the Water or something, I hadn't thought of that, but people would go, "Why is he playing that with that guitar?" No, you never get accused that. You might get accused of playing, look, he's playing Sultans of Swing on a Les Paul. There are a couple of things, but that's always a mixture of the song being so iconic and the guitar being so iconic. There are things that line up like that, but mostly you can kind of feel okay playing anything with one or two of the basic styles of guitar. But this thing, no. This thing, you can do it, of course, but people just sort of don't. And it's got a mystique, and its specificity and its mystique and its association are Brian May and Queen, and I can't think of any single famous band where someone has played one of these. Now, you might say, well, that's because you know, the best one you'll get is a £700 Brian May guitars version. But actually, a Burns one or a Brian May one are fantastic. You don't have to go up and get a handmade Andrew Guyton one, or, you know, from a lot of good guitar makers who make these from the original plans, because there's a very full set of plans and templates and so forth. But I'd love to do a survey of where they actually get played, and I could be completely wrong, but I don't think that's totally wrong. So that's why I got rid of it, because it didn't do any. It was too specific for me. I liked it. It tremoloed beautifully. You know, it was nice having the out of phase bits and bobs. I like the thick neck. It's a bit wide. Well, it's quite wide and quite thick and so on. Nothing I didn't really like about it, other than I was annoyed, as I am with any guitar that has a 0 fret, because they tend to notch very quickly, regardless of whether you put a stainless one in or not. They're just, by definition, the string sitting on there 24/7 tends to notch. So you're either going to have to be replacing it or getting it crowned a couple of times before it's too low, and then you'll need to replace it and so on. So there's a kind of permanent attention, or regular attention to there is going to be needed, because otherwise it starts making a clicking sound. This one isn't doing it. It was a tiny bit, but you know, that's the curse of the 0 fret. Of course, the good thing about the 0 fret is that it by default sets your action, your first fret action, to a really nice low height, given us an overall standard good setting overall. The triangulation will give you a nice low action. See, this nut here is only for spacing, hence I'm not going to replace it tonight, because it's not really doing much of a, well, you could argue that it's pulling, the tremolo's pulling backwards and forwards, but they're so wide, these slots, that they tend to be really good, because they're only there to hold the strings in place side to side. The fret, or the nut action, is taken by this 0 fret. So it's a great instrument, and we know that because Brian May made kind of a career out of it, and a fantastic invention that is him and his dad made. The sound that these make, they're not going to be Fendery. They're kind of clangy. They have a jangly clang about them, which is unique to the Burns. And I know that Brian, who's bought this one, also has a Burns Bison with the same, similar, if not the same pickups in there. So he liked the sound of those. I'm sure he'll like the sound of these. I've got a set of these in the guitar I made called the Rickenbacker, which was a sort of headless Rickenbacker tribute, which actually is a total dog's dinner of a guitar, because you know it was a prototype. But I do quite like the clangy tone from the pickup. So even that I could use, but the shape in itself is too specific for me, or the look and the associations. Anyway, so I'm going to basically do a small little bit of setup here, and obviously I'm going to take care of the frets. There was quite a bit of, or a little bit of fret slap, but we've got to get the action down to the right level. Now, one of the things that we don't have much control about under here is the height of, well, I don't think we do. I don't quite know the settings on this Burns bridge, so I would like to have a look under there, because if I don't have any up and down settings on this Burns tremolo bridge, i.e. if it's permanently fixed to this height off the deck, which it probably is to give it the backwards. It's kind of like doing a bit of not a Floyd Rose, but it's got a, yeah, well, it's permanently floating, but without being canted up at the edge. So it's got, by being lifted up, it has some backward travel, is what I'm saying. Like a Floyd Rose will have a recess in there, so it can tip back in. Anyway, but if there's no action adjustment on the pivots down there underneath here, then all we've got is the action on these, and I've already lowered them as much as they can go. And I think I might be close to their target action. Let's just have a look. Sorry. Oh, look, I've got a brand new string action ruler. Thank you, Adam. It's nice to have a new one. So, well, this is coming in at, yeah, it's just on the mark. Yeah, just about right. So actually we're not in any trouble here. So it's at the correct action, the target action I'd want. But I think I did I find that it had some chokes on the high bends? Yeah. So at that action, it was definitely choking out all the way. So we're just going to pretty much go check the neck relief, and then we're going to go, it's a little bit too much, so we can tweak that. But then we can get straight into basically leveling. Now normally typically I might set the action down and level it as a hardtail, but actually it's stable as it is, so I don't mind doing it that way. Let me find a screwdriver. Yeah, so I hope I haven't put Brian, inverted commas, off in any way. Like I said, the only actual technical thing I don't like about this guitar, I like the tuners, I like the tremolos, whether on this Burns model or the Brian May Guitars model. I like the 0 fret and its sort of default setting of the 1st fret action. The neck's great, sound is interesting from those, the control is unique, and it's a beautiful looking thing. What is there not to like about this? And the only thing I didn't like is the fact that it's a little head heavy, and that's because they hollowed that out. What are we looking for? 4mm. They hollowed it out to make it chambered, or Brian May made it chambered with his DAR, and as a result, it's I guess it's a bit less weight in the body department, because it's got that nice chambered business. They've made a fantastic book about the original construction and of the Red Special, and shown details, really good, nice close-up details of it all taken apart when it was being set up. Sorry, refurbed and then reset up. So, you know, I think in some ways we've had more insight into this, the original Red Special, than many other guitars. Although actually taking apart famous guitars and having them kind of laid out like a pathologist is quite common. So, okay, so this is just lower the action a tiny bit by flattening it. So I'm just going to tweak the actions just to make sure that they're in the right sort of department. But yeah, that's the only complaint I've got, is the slight neck heaviness. I suppose, like as with a lot of things, if it really bothered you, you could modify it and put some weight, extra ballast in here. Sort of would defeat some people's object, if you like. You know, you don't really want to fill up the hollow chamber, which is made hollow to be resonant and to feed back. But if it's you know, if it's too light in the body and it needs it, then you have to do it. Or you may find you have to buy one of those big neoprene grippy straps, and I've certainly got one of those. Quite hard to read off this scale. Probably better to just do it by eye, whereas good. So yeah, so that's why, and there was a part of me thinking, you know, when I sold it on, I thought to myself, oh, I'm going to regret this, because, you know, it's the only brand name guitar I treated myself to. Hello, are you listening? It's not listening. Shut up. Oh, calibrate up and down. It's not listening. Normally it listens quite well. Okay, that's pretty good, ready to go. Let's get the marker pens out. Let's get the leveling beam, the famous banana, which has been recovered, so it's got fresh, pretty new-ish stuff on it. Now this one's a little bit harder to. No, it's not too bad. But I've just I'm going to just have to do these things in. Colour the frets in stages here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to include the 0 fret in this leveling. Am I? No, yes, no. Yes, no, no I'm not. The 0 fret is a fraction higher than I would prefer, but the reason they do that is because obviously they know it's going to have to be taken down a little bit. So actually, to begin with, I'm going to clear it off and avoid doing anything with it. But it technically wouldn't hurt to do it, but I can see the notches on it, so I think I'll just level it separately, believe it or not, so I can get rid of any notch that's on there, and it'll be a random amount of leveling, only a small amount. It will have the effect of slightly lowering the first fret action, which is no problem because we don't want it that high anyway. Come on. Yeah, so we'll just treat it separately, but I can see that it's got notches on there already, which won't be a problem to get rid of. But my main reason for leveling the frets on here is to basically to free up the notes and the bends, because there are some that are just not happy at a low action, and it should be. This is a, you know, this is a quality guitar that should play with any low action you choose. The other little tiny detail, and again I think that Brian, inverted commas, was sounded a little bit disappointed when I mentioned it, that it has some slight lifted fret ends, or such that the high E string can just slip, well, not when it's out of there, when it's in its saddle, it can get caught like that under the fret edge, which we don't want. So I think a little bit of work with some CA glue just to seal that off really would be warranted, but I might need to think about how I apply that, because I want the tiniest amount really. Anyway, I've gone and painted the bleeding 0 fret anyway. Right, so let's get on. I've got the action set where I want it at this end, I've got the relief set where I want it, very little, and I'm going to now level out these frets. And of course the leveling process will, as always, show what the situation is with the frets on this guitar, and judging by the choke outs, we're going to need to do some, there needs to be some leveling done. Okay, good start. We're calibrated from the get-go. So the E track. Now this is always the, what should we call it? The diagnostic track. So second fret, sorry, the first fret is actually a little bit low. Third fret's high by the looks of it, just an immediate assessment. Okay, so straight away I can see that we've got high fret here, okay, okay, high, lowish, okay, okay, a bit higher, okay, low, okay, okay, low, 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 okay, okay, low, okay, 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 to the end. So we've got, just visually, see if I can, never actually get to see it properly, but if I give you, what should we do it with? If I just highlight the low frets, okay, and do it that way, we've got low, low, and then we've got, just as a quick visual, lukey, low, 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 and one more, just about. Okay, so that's the lukey. 26 minutes, we're still recording, so the memory's okay. So low, low, 5 in a row, low, low. So that means that bending here is going to choke out because you're bending from in a ditch. That's why those notes were choking. So we have to work on that if we want to free up those notes, basically. There's no way around it. So let us keep on thingying, leveling. So that's the first run, and as I said, I always treat that really as diagnostic. There's not a lot of metal being taken off. Realistically, it tells me what's going on. But because I know that there's a great low spot straight after 12, it's what will explain why notes bent here choke out. Notes bent here play nearly. Well, they choke out too, but it's certainly why that's going to be one of the big reasons why they choke out from that point onwards. So the problem being is that a low patch of frets makes the subsequent ones behave as if they're high. So when we find a low patch, the only options you've got are either to raise the playing action and so that you're lifting your playing action out of the effect of the low frets, or you have to take down the surrounding frets and bottom out, or somewhat bottom out, the low frets. Now, people sort of think, well, how's that happened? And it happens because, I used to think it was because the frets were hit in at different forces and so on, but actually I'm much more inclined to think these days it happens because the neck under load is actually bending. Now these play individually. See, look, we've improved that considerably. I'm going to leave it where it is for a minute, and I'm going to move on to the B track and see what that tells us. I expect, as a default, I expect that to pretty much confirm what we already know. Actually, there's no reason why I shouldn't just nip that first, that 0 fret as well while I'm at it, since we want to get rid of the, it's higher than the others, but we might as well just give it a hit, because we want to get rid of that little bit of wear, notching. Yeah, so expect the pattern to be continued along here when I do the B track. So expect to see the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th frets being basically low, but in fact they're improved. So it seems like it's the edge of the fretboard that might be a little bit lower. So it's not, it still is registering a low spot, but it's not as extreme as it was towards the edge. So that's good. Okay, so now the G track, and I'll recalibrate for this. The G track is usually where your bending problems come in. So if there's a high spot in the G track, that's where it will, your strings will bend into that congestion, if you like. And that happens because of the geometry of it. As you're bending the strings on a radius like this, you're pushing them uphill from their start point, which is, if you like, in this case, further down. Think of the cross section. It's very hard to imagine it. It's a three-dimensional thing, but the anchor point of your bend is further down in 3 dimensions, and it's pushing up the hill at the top of this cross section, and then it has to go down again to its anchor point lower down here. Relatively speaking, it's not a huge amount lower, but it is still lower because the radius is lower. The radius is preserved at the bridge as well. So it's a problem of geometry, but then it's compounded by if you have high frets in the G track as well, which then show up or cause the choke out of the frets, of the notes that are being bent. So it's a combination of the basic geometry in a 3D cross section and any tiny unevenness in the fret track, I call it, or the string track. A tiny bit more at the top end here, and then I'll be happy with that. So this has got 24 fabulous frets, starting very close to the edge of the body. So it's a nice, one of those necks that feels like it's a long way out. Of course, the downside of that is because it is a long way out, it further accentuates the top heaviness or the neck dive-ness. But as I say, a big chunkier strap would go a long way to putting that right. And this is, I always have the cheapest, nastiest strap in the workshop because it's a good indicator. You know, if I try a guitar that's you know, top heavy, but I've got a really thick strap on or a really grippy strap, then I don't notice the top heaviness of it. In a way, I like to be aware of it so I can be realistic about whether it needs some extra ballast weight or not. Okay, so now I'm doing the D track, and it's all cutting, so it looks pretty good at this point. So of course, part of what's happening here is I'm going to be getting rid of the wear on the 0 fret. Again, it will come back within 6 months, probably less, because that's how it does. There's just nothing we can do about it. But we're also getting rid of all of that grime that was on the frets as well. So this will look nice and fresh when we polished it all out. That's good. Still the same profile, or same really curve. So yeah, that I really have to think about that Brian May specificity, you know, and the fact that I don't know anybody else that walks out on stage in any semi-famous or big name or semi-big name band, you know, because you'd notice it. Any guitar player type of person would notice it straight away, and you'd remember that such and such, so and so from I don't know, you tell me, you know, I'm not, Green Day or something. If the thingy bloke in Green Day played a Brian May, you'd go, oh yeah, he always plays a Brian May. But you don't find anyone like that, because they don't, weirdly. Anyhow, so that's the weird thing. And if I'm honest, when I had it, I did think about taking it to little band, you know, I say band practice, it's like it's some big fabulous thing. No, it's just a local covers band. But I still thought about, oh, shall I take my new, you know, top-notch quality control brand that I've paid 700 quid for, and it actually made me think twice about taking it. And partly because, and that sounds, you know, pathetic probably, but I love Queen, and I don't actually know how to play any clever Brian May solos, or very few. So, you know, I hated the idea. Of going out and playing, and then somebody going, go on, play me Bohemian Rhapsody, come on, you're crap. I just hated that thought. So I just didn't take it, which seemed really weird. I mean, I have no problem taking any of the guitars I've made out, because they don't say anything about me other than, oh look, I've never seen that guitar before, or what's that logo? Well, he's made that himself, I think. No problem with that. Plays great, feels great, does the job, sounds good. You know, and okay, my playing's limited, but the guitar performs great. So, but I didn't feel that about the Brian May. It felt like it would put too much demand on me straight off. So I'm going to just these are catching on the edge. Now I will have a look at them close up through the thingies. Let's have a close look. But I think it'll be time to take these strings off, because I think we're done. Obviously the bridge is going to tilt backwards now. Yeah, so how weird to have feel pressured by a guitar, and that's, if I'm honest, that's what bugged me a little bit. I just didn't feel, I felt like it wasn't just a guitar to take and play, and I kind of almost imagined that, I sort of thought that people would look at me funny if I didn't, you know, if I went on and I didn't play something Queen-like or clever, you know. Which way am I going to undo this? Thank you. You know, like there would be an expectation, and I wouldn't necessarily meet that expectation, and the band probably wouldn't, because they didn't necessarily want to play a load of Queen songs just because I had a Brian May guitar. So a weird sort of thing, really. And of course, there's always a first time for somebody to say, blow that, I don't care. I'm just going to play it. I don't care if it's got associations. That's all in the head anyway. And so it is. So, you know, maybe it's only because a bunch of people have been susceptible to worrying about it, as I was. Let's just get these screws off here. So yeah, sold it. Probably lost a couple of £100 from new, but it was nicely set up, and I didn't regret it really. You know, and ever since then, I've just basically had the feeling that I've got more than enough of my own guitars to play. I don't feel any need for anything else. I've got quite enough to be keeping me busy, and so I'm not, you know, I don't have gas the way some people do. It's not really that big a deal, not of a deal, but big a deal for me. Anyway, oh shoot. I've got to keep an eye on the clock. I have to take a break and do... take a break. Sorry about this. Back in a minute. I can hear my sparrows up in the land of... No, not sparrows, swallows. Up in the land of swallows. I'm going to take these springs off a minute. Sorry about that. Because I want to examine this tremolo, how it works. Straight line 4. Off it comes. Okay. Ooh. Right, so there's no height adjustment as suspected. So we have thus kind of fitting, knife edges, nice and solid, and then fits into this thing here. Maybe you could lift that up higher, I don't really know. Those have some adjustment on them, so they could go up higher. That's true, but you'd have to do it this way. As you can see, you don't have any options. If I were to do it, I would take it up a tiny bit. Find the right tool for it. Nope, that's not the right one. I would take it up half a turn. half a turn. That's all. So that theoretically now raises this up by a tiny fraction as it goes onto there. Wow. That's something that's interesting. That's very interesting. Wow. How do we get it on there straight? Sorry, I'm just trying to look at this. Get it in line. Okay, so that does touch down on the scratch plate right at the edge. That's a bit odd. That is concerningly weird. Sorry, you're not getting a very good view. Sorry, camera work is terrible. Okay, so just generally, when I get this up into position on the two thingies, it's got a lot of downward travel, but when you come up, it's connecting with the scratch plate, which you don't really want to do. I mean, you're not going to get a massive amount more out of it than that, but and people aren't going to be dive bombing with this, but you sort of would think you'd want that to be away from the scratch plate. How about that? Right, I'm just going to zoom out again and put it back on its springers, which will be quite tricky. I have to hold it like so. Let's put one there. Okay. That should be all right. It's only one spring in there for a second, but okay. Yeah, it ends up hitting the scratch plate. That's not very brilliant. If that was mine, I would probably make an adjustment on that. How weird. Anyway, and by the way, it's got nothing to do with the height adjustment we've made. It's a front to back distance thing, which is preventing it from going forward anymore, and that's not been affected by raising the bridge post a fraction that I just did there. So that's where we were. Touching the bottom in the end. So that just under load with no strings in it, that sits back a little bit. So that'll be fine when it's got a load on it, like so. And that actually, yeah, that lifts off because it touches down on there. It's an uneven touch down on the back. So if you had a little stack of these that we put under there, there we go. That's how it's best done, like so. There's a little where it bends down, that touches down first and tilts the whole thing, unless it's got strings on it. So that would definitely be something I would want to take care of. Small flaw, Mr. Burns. There, right there. Touchy-feely. Look at that. Touching down right there. It sort of probably does a tiny bit on this side. It's still too close. But you'd really want that curve to come further in. Not good, Burns. So that's the second little issue I've discovered with this. Right, it's running a bit late now, so I'm sort of lining up to do the a bit more. I won't finish time, I don't think, but I'm going to do some. I'm going to do the fret crowning now. Sorry, the reason I'm running late is I had a briefing chat with a customer just now. So, okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to separately crown the 0 fret, and basically I hand filed that a little bit to remove most of the, what you call them, notches. Not all of them, it's not complete, but I've taken most of it away. Then I'm going to go back to the regular frets and just re-crown these. Tiny bit of wear showing, still, that's okay. I never aim to remove all the wear just for its own sake, unless a customer specifically wants that. I try to get rid of as much as I can within the leveling process, but the levelness is the target I'm after, not have I got rid of any small grooves that are down on those open chords. Okay. So we'll give this a clean up afterwards because the fingerboard's a little bit grimy from use. So it's been played. I guess it's just not been played for a long time. I think that's probably what's happened. This sort of finger play grime has been left on the fingerboard, but it's been left untouched long enough for all the frets at the top end to become grimy. So here we've got quite a low fret that's taken a fair bit of leveling. Sorry, a high fret that's taken a fair bit of leveling here. The 7th fret. So as a result of that, it takes a bit more work to re-crown it or re-profile it. So I'll probably finish this off tomorrow. But there's not going to be a ton more to do other than polish out the fret, sand and polish the frets, give it an overall clean. I don't think we can really do anything with this. This would have to be kind of physically ground down to slightly reshape that scratch plate. But doable, but I doubt realistically that anyone is going to play that far forward. That's the, that's the reality of it. It's I think Brian, inverted commas, my customer for this guitar, didn't really wasn't that interested in having the tremolo anyway in functioning, so he's not going to be bending it flat onto the deck, trying to dive bomb it. But it's just one of those little observations. It's a shame that it connects with the plastic guard, pick guard, when it might as well not, for the sake of a couple of millimeters of more care in the design. Certainly on a Strat, sometimes if the bridge returning to position touches the back end of the scratch plate, sometimes that can actually prevent it from returning to tune, to pitch properly, or it can certainly interfere with it. So it's can be quite an important consideration. Here it's slightly different. It's just resting on it, so it's not. The Strat tends to be a square-edged thing, so it can get quite sandwiched down in there. This is a beveled piece, and the worst that will happen is that the plate touches onto it, but and can't go any further. But unlike the Strat one, it won't get wedged in there, which is a sort of small positive amongst all of it. Right. Here we are. Okay. Re-crowning done. Then we could get a cloth and clean it off. So we know what the structure is underneath the bridge thing, which is interesting. That's good to know. We have leveled the frets, and I'm going to give them a bit of a clean off. And they're still, down the sides, they're still kind of grubby and a bit corroded isn't the right word. The word I'm looking for is tarnished. That's a better word. Now I've still got that thing about the ends of these frets needing a little bit of work to stop the strings getting caught. Now it's not unusual. It's not unusual for the frets to be kind of sticking up a tiny bit at the end, because if you think about it, they are just chisel-like faces of metal touching down on a fingerboard, and it's, you know, the tiniest little gap is quite likely, and as soon as it's there the strings can catch on it. So it's not a major problem or a design thing or a build thing. Nothing major bad's gone wrong. It's just that while it's kind of lifted that little tiny bit, it can catch the strings, as demonstrated earlier. So there's a couple of things I might consider doing. One is, see, tapping them down isn't really going to work, because they're all like that and they won't go anywhere. You'd have to try and glue them down and hold them with a press if you're going to do, but it would have to do to every single one of them. So it's just how it's been built. In fact, there's a tiny gap at the end of all of them, and it is, I have to say, it is susceptible to the strings catching. And I think the only realistic way of getting around this is a little bit of glue boost or something. I'm looking at this nut here. Actually, this nut is shimmed. I think somebody's shimmed this nut already, and it's working fine, so I'm not going to mess with it, but there is evidence that somebody's had a go at improving what was there. So, a little bit of residue of glue or something. It may be that they've actually replaced the original plastic one with a tusk one, looking at this, but there is a slight shim under there. Actually, it's quite a big shim, unless I'm completely mad. Sorry, you can't see a darn thing. You probably still can't see a darn thing. I'm just looking on the back of this. That's quite a tall looking shim. Just sweeping to see what's on there. Yeah, I think somebody's done a big shimming job. So maybe they've replaced it with a piece of tusk or a tusk nut, and in doing so they've shimmed it. I'm going to try and give you a little view on this, because it's quite always interesting, like detective work. You can see that. Can you see, if I hold you in place, can you see that that shim is about yay thick to about there? If I can keep my blade to stay still, about that thick on that end, and then it comes to a thinner bit right at this end. You see where the join is, like that. So it's a wedge-shaped shim, but it's produced a good result, and I think that is probably a tusk nut that somebody's made from a block, or they converted. But you can see that in doing so, there's just that little bit of shim material showing. You could kind of improve that just by getting a black marker pen and blobbing some colour under there just to darken it off. I've got a sharp one in blue, but not in. I've got a fat one in black. You know, you can just darken that down a bit. It's not a problem. It's just showing up as a little bit of an inset there. Caught some dust or something over time, but yeah, you could just blob a bit of Sharpie on there. It's not a bad job. At least it's not causing any tuning issues, which hence I'm not going to do anything to it. But just an observation, so somebody's changed that. Okay, so the next thing will be to, sorry, I'm sure you're enjoying the sky there. The next bit will be to mask this off, which I'll do off camera now before going home. Mask this off and be ready to polish it out tomorrow, which I think that's where I'll leave it for tonight. So thank you for watching. See you shortly. We're back here with the Burns of London Brian May. And after, between then and now, I've polished the frets out, cleaned everything up, and we're sort of ready to go. But I've also done some filling of the fret ends with some super glue, and it's been an absolute pain to do actually, but it's done and it stops the strings catching. So it's a big deal to try and blob super glue on there and then sand it back flush or whatever, mixture of scraping and sanding. So anyway, we're done. So what I'm going to do now is string up, and then we're going to go up to pitch, and then we're going to I probably should have washed my hands first, so since I didn't do that, I'm just going to clean them off with some chemicals, some unsuitable chemicals. So yeah, so cleaned or sorted out the problem, whoops, with those things. Lifting fret edges. The problem is, you know, some people will say, why don't you you know, go around with a fret hammer and tap them down. Tapping those kind of cut fret ends that come to the edge of here, that won't make them stay down. If they don't stay down to begin with, it's only a tiny little bit, and it's because they either need some glue, super glue under there when you're pressing them, or they're just going to stay lifting very slightly. So it's quite a pain, but it's a shame to have it spoiled by strings catching underneath the under the fret ends, especially, you know, for a premium-ish guitar like this. You really don't want that sort of experience. So I'm just going to restring, and then we'll get on to sort of the stretching out and getting the tremolo set. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about tremolos, but there's a couple of ways you could do this. And sometimes when I'm faced with, or I'm dealing with a tremolo that's going to be fully floating like this one is, sometimes I like to do all the setup work with it kind of fixed down, and to do that I just basically pull in the tremolo claw screws so that I just overload the tremolo, and that really keeps it as a sort of hardtail, and then I leave it like that until such times as it's time to float the tremolo. It's time to light the light. It's time to meet the Muppets on the Muppet Show tonight. Righty. So tonight on the Muppet Show, tonight on the Reloved Guitars studio show, I've got one of my guitars up here for a bit of remedial work, and it's the world infamous Deaconbacker, which sort of began life as I had a spare neck. Actually, I had a twisted neck that the manufacturer then replaced kindly, and then because they replaced it, I thought, well, maybe I'll plane it flat and put a new fingerboard on it, which I did, and then it became a usable neck. And then I thought, well, I better make a guitar out of it. So the next thing happened was I thought, well, what shall I make? I think I had some, what did I have? I think I had some poplar, or I was thinking of what to make. And let's get my battery powered thing. Yeah, I was thinking of what to make, and I thought I decided to put gloss finish on the fingerboard because I quite like that touch. And then I thought, well, what instrument typically has a gloss finish? And it's typically a Rickenbacker. So that got me looking at the Rickenbacker 325, which I always thought was a fantastic looking guitar. So I kind of progressed to making it a headless tribute to a Rickenbacker 325, which I thought was quite a nice style, and so I really liked how it came out, but it was a bit experimental. In other words, I went through about 5 different iterations of the bridge, and the reason I did that was because I started out by making I made the neck sit lower to the body than lower to the body than a real Rickenbacker. A real Rickenbacker 325 has quite a tall. Can I just get this on, please? Has quite a tall gap down here, but I don't like that personally, so I made it short. But the problem is the general geometry of the Rickenbacker 325 actually depends on that strange high step, because it sort of works with a kind of tunematic style bridge to a certain extent, and then it needs a certain height and so on. Anyway, I ended up with something that was too low to work really, because of my choice about the neck angle or the neck height as it joined the body. So I was stuck. So I had to kind of improvise various different, various different bridges, and eventually ended up with a sort of a mixture of about 3 different bridges doing one job, which is not very clever technically, but it worked. So I wouldn't obviously do it that way in future. So it was good to learn what I wouldn't do from the prototype. That's the whole point, I guess. Anyhow, so what happened was it disappointed me in that I found it too square a guitar, too sharp edged. I didn't like the sharpness of the contours. I realised I like a much more organic Strat type softened shaped guitar. And come on, undo this. And so it was never as comfortable as I would have liked it. Why isn't this going through? Come along. It goes through at a little bit of an angle. It's not quite dead central, which you sort of imagine it would be. Come on, lock on. Thank you. Yeah, so it was it's definitely a prototype. I kept sort of trying, not playing it, and then I wasn't happy with the fret levelness, and I kind of occasionally would have a look at it and think about redoing it and stuff. But eventually it sat around for a while, and it's actually, every time I pick it up now, I think it's far better than I thought it was. So I was kind of halfway to pulling out the pickups and reusing them for something else, until I thought actually it deserves to live on its own, because it is a great looking guitar, and I'd love to play it in a pub covers band sort of scenario, because it's so unique, and it's powered by the TriSonics that I bought for it, because once I'd given back my Red Special, I quite like the idea of having TriSonics somewhere in the mix. So before I get any before I do any more thingying, before I do any more trying to balance this up, I'm just going to stretch out as much of the slack as I can from these strings. I'm just looking at the slots there, and I'm going to just keep an eye on them, and I may use one of the what do they call them, nut files, to widen them slightly if I think there's any sort of catch. There's a little, they're very deep, and there's maybe a little bit of friction that I don't want. So anyway, that's what I'll do. Now, normally when you're floating the tremolo, it's very difficult to tune up using a fork, relative tuning. So this is now up to it's pretty much up to its pitch. Okay. Yeah, you don't want to go too far forward on these because you will hit the edge of that scratch plate. So as with all tremolo systems, you've got to get all of the slack out of here before it'll reward you with any tuning reliability. So I might do this 3 or 4 times, and I might still run the files through those slots at the end just to be sure. Now there is a chance that doing the stretching breaks the high E string, hence thankfully these rotor sounds have a spare high E. So I'm heard a tiny ping there, so I'm just going to run through with the these things just to, well, it's one of these difficult things. It's too high a nut, and if I go down with this thing here, it's going to make a much wider. I would have to rework the whole thing. Let's just make sure it doesn't do anything. I mean, if necessary, I will take it down and then I will take off the excess height over the side, because there's no need for it. It just creates a very tall high-sided slot, which is not really any use to anybody. So the action has gone up at the moment because of the fact that I raised what's-its. Actually, that wasn't the way I wanted to go. I wanted to go down. I actually made it rise upwards, didn't I? Silly boy. Yeah, so right now this is too high, so I will first of all take this down and see where we get to, and if necessary I may have to slack it all off and do it again. We shall see. Quick look. A tiny bit low now. And let's just look at this by comparison. Yeah, so I'm just doing this by eye for a minute, and then I will balance it up afterwards. Just because it's easier to do it from this angle than it is looking down at it, basically. Okay. Let's have a quick look. Almost there. So sometimes it's easier to just eyeball it and follow the radius, because you can see the sort of gaps and where they're a bit uneven. That feels quite good. Obviously the tuning is going to be out now. Not much. Right, so this nut does have a little bit of clunk on it, and that's a problem because to get it to even or to loosen up, I do have to cut the slots if we don't want it to get caught. And the whole point of this is to have the tremolo stay in tune. So what it means is I'm going to have to cut down, but first of all I'm going to have to shave, file down the top of this, top of the nut, which seems really a sad thing to do. But as you might be able to see from here, if you look at how deep that nut slot is, that is really, really deep. It's unnecessarily deep. Look at how far in there that's sitting. And it needs to be slightly wider, and of course you now can't get to it to make it any wider the way it's built. Sorry. So the whole point of this nut business is that's why it's true that you don't need any material above the nut, above the bottom of the string. All of the rest of that is superfluous, and it's just going to cause problems. Now it's a shame to have to file it down, because it means we have to do more work, and we have to be obviously careful to get it down to the right sort of height, and that's not going to be a quick job, as you can see. So as we get closer, I'm going to need to then basically polish up the top of the nut again. So there's a load of extra material that we don't need, and like I said, I can't really get to widen these slots because they're so deep, and so the bottom line is we get to do some reduction here. And it's not rocket science, you just have to be careful, and ideally it's angling it back a little bit, but even that's not critical. What matters is the slots angle backwards. So we'll get there slowly but surely. Obviously we get a load of fuzz sticking up at the end, but basically we'll take that down until there's as little room as possible, or little material as possible above the strings. It's actually a hell of a long way to go while we're on the treble side, so I can cut away fairly merrily for the time being. It obviously gets a bit shaggy on the edges, but that's not a problem. And the other thing too is, if you try and widen nut slots when they're this deep, what happens is because of the depth of the slot, you tend to find that your cut downwards wanders off in the wrong direction. So you can actually get a misaligned, you can really mess up it's not too bad if the slot's already cut right down to the bottom, but it's a danger of the big part of the slot wants to wander off sideways, which you don't want to happen. So I mean, you could possibly do this with a Dremel sanding drum, but I find a flat file is kind of more reliable, and I find it a bit more controllable in some ways for this sort of job. So we're getting much lower. There's no, like I say, there's absolutely no need or benefit in having a tool or this material above the strings. So, and the original nut, even though this one's looks like a replacement, the original nut has too much material above the slots. So, you know, lift that out, and it's still about a millimeter's depth. It's more than you need. You can switch to different sanding blocks, different grades of stuff. So for example, I've got this very solid brass thingy here which I can work away with. Obviously I want to stop before I reach the strings, but even in the unlikely event that I hit the strings in my filing, then I can always put some new strings in, but it's unlikely that I will. This is not a very good file for taking off a lot of material, so it's a little bit on the slow side. Probably end up going back to this one. So you'd be surprised when this is done how low this nut actually ideally should be, and of course it never is that low. Sorry about the terrible camera work, I've moved the darn thing. Yeah, it never actually is built that low, but it actually should be, ideally should be that low to work the best it can. So I'm just lowering it now, the last bit. Come down to some impurities in the material. So now, you know, it's the sort of height now where I could now bring the widen the slot a little bit. So it's got some shagginess going on. So there we have a wider slot, and it won't look too ridiculous, although it's still too high, but now that will move through there without any problem. And I could do the same now all the way across. 13. So I've got some difficult to clear the slot to begin with. And I'm obviously keeping an eye out to avoid touching the 0 fret, which I don't want to do. The G. Actually, if you need to clear this one, you might as well go in with a thinner one first. So that gets rid of the curly bits that we've built up from before. Then the correct one for the gauge. Okay. Better. So a smaller one, larger one. That's just clearing it really. This one's going to be the 26 one. So after this, obviously, I'm going to have to clean up the nut more using some finer paper and stuff, so I'll move the strings out of the way for that. So that's that one, and then we switch it around and do the other side. And wrong side of this one, followed by the right side of this one. Good. Can you see it? Oh yeah, I'm still on target. Right, you can probably see there's still a tiny bit of the original notching still on there, a little evidence of it, because I didn't take it all off, I just took it down a tiny bit, but there we go. So what I'm going to do is to keep this safely up, so I don't want to have to put too much stress on the strings or have to undo them too far. I'm just going to prop that up. Then I'm going to take the strings off to one side. That's sinking back on the paper. Now I can just clean up the nut. So it's a lot of material come off there compared to what was on, and there still could be quite a bit more if we wanted to. Not least because you know, it's currently all, or it's better when it leans backwards. So here I'm doing a bit more leaning while I'm shaping. And it'll never be kind of factory perfect if it's done by hand, but it's doing it so that it's the right amount of material compared to what was there before, which was too much. Right, get all the shaggy bits out of the way. God, it's hardly any material at all. I mean, those still look really tall, but they're on a slope and they come up. They actually touch the wood, I think, as well. So. But my concern is mainly that it works without gripping the strings. That's my number one concern. So here I'm just rounding off the very back part of it. Which I can then brush clear again. And then what I would probably do next is get a block with a bit of sandpaper on it. So we can start out with something like this one. Same brass block, but I'm just going to use it to use a bit of heft, a bit of 180 grit. It just helps me to smooth that back a bit. Fuzz. Now I'm going to put on a lighter grit with a lighter shade of grit. Get me a scissors. One of the songs that I've been learning for this band I'm in, covers band, is You'll Never Walk Alone. It's a sort of special treat for the person whose party we're playing at later this week. At the weekend is the word I'm looking for. And it's one of those songs that it's actually more complex in some ways, well, musically more complex than you may think to begin with. Certainly more than I'd ever paid it attention. And it does some really interesting chord. It has an interesting chord progression, which is sort of non-standard, and leaves me kind of thinking, wow, what's going on? But I like it. It doesn't. It confuses me a little bit, and I like that. It's not your average thing just plodding through. So I sort of spent a bit of time listening to it a few times in a row, as you do when you've got to play something that you're not really that familiar with. And I was just surprised at how much I realised I liked it. You know, what a beautiful, powerful piece of music it is. And then I started thinking about what are the other songs kind of like that particularly in the 60s sort of songbook. You know, and I think they're different, very different, but in some ways similar. Is might be Whiter Shade of Pale, you know, which is itself an absolutely beautiful thing. But I was really amazed at how much the You'll Never Walk Alone, how the melody makes you feel like you're in the 60s. It's almost tangible. You can almost taste it. And of course I was a kid, you know, a little kid in the 60s. Very little kid. But you know, it clearly has a sort of memory, a sonic memory or something, like a lot of the Beatles do. But yeah, so I really like that when you have to listen to something you haven't really heard before, and you kind of realise how much you like it, and how enjoyable, how pleasurable it is. What a great piece of music. And then I think the You'll Never Walk Alone has this amazing chord change from, well, I can't remember what it is now, from E to C7. Get back in your groove, mate. Okay. Don't mind about the tuning. Okay, let's a bit more stretching and then a bit more tuning. Oh, I bet the view is terrible because I'm not even thinking about you, my poor, long-suffering watcher, looker. So I got a message today on in email from Pat from Australia saying, "Oh, we're staying 15 miles up the road from you or something. Have you? We've got some guitars with us. We need to practice for a gig back in Australia at the weekend or something next week. Have I got any strings? So they can pop by and say hello." I just so happen to have some 1152s. Yeah, 1150. Yes, 1152s. Didarios. So that will do the trick. So I'll let them know, and they can come over. check where we are on action. We are very low. Let us go, let's go half a turn, half a turn, half a turn, half a turn. Yeah, so that'd be interesting. I always love it when people come from a ridiculous distance away. I know not just to see me, but you know, to find an excuse to drop in along the way. I just love it. And they won't be the first people from Australia. Right, let's just see where we're at a minute. I think that's good, actually. So there we have it. Sorry, a bit of abrupt ending, but yeah. So yeah, a bit of an adjustment to that nut with far too much material sticking up that wasn't necessary. So I've got black tusk everywhere. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this tremolo arm has a little grub screw at the back too, which you can adjust, and that's a good thing about it. It isn't too bad the way it's set at the moment. But it is such that if you wish to have a slightly stiffer matron, slightly stiffer arm, then you can so do by making an adjustment. It's probably better to do it when the strings are being changed. But you can do it at any point, really. So there we have it, the Brian May special by Burns of London. The very individual TriSonic pickups, and a guitar that, as I said to begin with, is almost a victim of its specialness, its own specialness. It's almost too special for its own good, you know, insofar as how people do or don't use it as a general guitar, which I think is a shame, because you know it's a perfectly capable guitar with a set of nice and usable pickups. They are quite distinct from other things, so it's a sonic palette that you could, you know, well benefit from, but it's so particular that, of course, you may, as I did, you may not be bothered. You may be less stupid than me, highly likely, but you know, if you're anything like me, and there's no reason why you should be, you might find its specificity a little bit too great for taking it around to do the things that you perhaps want to do, like playing in your covers band, unless of course you have a bunch of Queen songs and you go some way to reproducing the Brian May sound that people expect, and play We Are the Champions a few times a night. But so, you know, it's perfect if that's you. It wasn't me. Secretly I kind of wish it was, because I have no problem playing a few Queen songs, but as it was, we weren't. So a bit too specific for that, but there you go. Beautiful guitar, and if you're interested in it feeding back, it does that beautifully because of the chambering in here. So Brian got that bit right, sorry, and his dad got that bit right. So anyway, that's me for video shooting today. Thank you for watching. Got a few different things coming in over the next week or two, so keep an eye out for different and interesting things. I can't think, well, there's another GS Mini Taylor coming in, and there's probably some things like there's a parts caster, a Harley Benton parts caster to kind of upgrade and tweak and set up. And there's also, what else is there? There's possibly a made in Mexico Strat for a refret as well. I'm not entirely sure when that is, but so I will just put the truss rod cover on this to complete everything, and we are ready to box it and go. And Brian, inverted commas, wink wink, nudge nudge, the secret buyer of this, can get it at a later date. Could be perhaps when we might just meet up for a jam somewhere, you never know. Now, interestingly, if you remember, just before I go, I remember me saying that I felt this was a little bit neck heavy. If I were keeping this, for me, if it was a keeper, I would probably do a little bit of ballasting in the electrics cavity. It's all very well having a light guitar, and it is quite light, but to me it's the balance is one of the most important aspects of it. So I would probably tweak it, and I've got a similar issue with the Harley Benton parts caster that I'll be working on for Kevin in the next few days, and that probably the balance on that will be corrected by adding a Bigsby to it, whereas obviously that's not a goer on this one. Anyway, so thank you for watching. See you again very soon.